This is another Patreon suggested video, and since we just had a hurricane here in Florida, I figured this is the perfect time to do this specific requested video. Hey there, creepy peeps. My name is Nightmare Maven. Welcome back to my channel. As you can see from the title, today we're going to be talking about disaster horror movies, like my favorite disaster horror movies. Please share yours in the comments. I do want to start by saying, like, when I looked up disaster movies to kind of like jog my memory, I realized I haven't seen too many like quote unquote disaster movies. Honestly, I think it's because they scare me a little bit. Especially the ones that are about natural disasters, because even though for the most part they're usually exaggerated to dramatize the film, it's still something that could happen, especially because we treat the planet like garbage. So, you know, stuff like this, I feel like it's just bound to happen, and we're gonna, like, all the natural disasters are gonna happen at one time. So it's hard for me to sit there and watch and be like, yeah, this is just a silly, goofy movie. But I have to start with the first movie that came to mind when I saw this request come in, and it possibly might be like the first disaster movie I've ever watched, that like first movie I ever watched that falls into that category, and that is The Day After Tomorrow. I live in a very hot part of the United States, so being cold, like being in a cold climate disaster kind of feels like a vibe to me. So I was like already drawn to this movie, right? Sort of like, would you rather like be always too cold or always too hot? I would much rather be too cold. Much rather be too cold. But this movie reminds that, like, yeah, no, being too cold can technically be dangerous, I guess. And this movie also has all of the bad things. I think just because of the poster, when I was looking at it, it just made me think of like the part where everything freezes over. But it's got like all of the disasters happening in this movie. I think I remember like there being tornadoes, there's a lot of heavy rain and like flooding and stuff, and then everything freezes. So it's like one big like climate disaster that happens all at one time, and that really freaks me out. Yet I wore out the DVD to this movie that we had. Clearly, like, starting the early stages of loving horror movies at this point. Like, it's scary, but I'm gonna watch it 5 million times anyway. Next one I have to mention is likely, it's gotta be Crawl, right? I feel like I have to include it. It's Florida, there's a hurricane, there's gators, you get it. I'm not in the part of Florida where you can actually have basements and like crawl spaces. Not allowed to. And really, that's okay with me because I don't like basements anyway. So I can't relate to that part of the movie, but I will say the rest of it is pretty relatable. Like, as Floridians, we do stupid shit during hurricanes. Battling alligators, things like that, all very accurate. Anytime there's a hurricane here, like actually a hurricane here, you can find videos online of people doing stupid shit, like playing in the like flooded streets and in the like really heavy rain when you really should not be outside at all. And before anybody freaks out on me for being too judgmental, I am included in this. I remember flying a kite with my across the street neighbor. I think it was during Charlie. But in my defense, that's the only time I remember us ever boarding up for a storm, and it was so boring. It was like being inside a box. I hated it, so I had to get outside. Although when it comes to Crawl, though, I would say the scariest part of the movie is the gators and not the storm. The storm in the movie, I feel like, is more just an excuse to like battle the gators because they otherwise wouldn't like come up to your house like that. Technically a disaster movie because there's like a huge devastating hurricane while everything else is happening, but I feel like the focus is the gators. Okay, so when I looked up disaster movies, I realized like I didn't take into account that there were other types of disaster movies, because maybe just because we just had a hurricane, my brain was on like natural disasters. But according to the internet, stuff like Cloverfield counts, This Is the End counts, Don't Look Up would also be a disaster movie. But I didn't think quite in that way, but that makes sense. So in that case, if those also count as disaster movies, I have to include Independence Day, which would be a disaster movie. I fucking love Independence Day, the movie. It's the only patriotic thing about me. Cast is every day of my life. I pray to any god that will listen that Bill Pullman could just be our president. I guarantee you, if that man ran in 2024, all he would have to do to win would be to recite that speech from Independence Day, and that would be it. It'd be done. It's also just a great alien movie. It's got everything. Cool explosions, the destruction of large cities, it's got humor, the aliens look legitimately scary. For the real number one, I didn't even say if this list was ranked or not. It really wasn't, except for this one. This one is number one and will always be number one, and I will accept no argument, and that is Twister. The cast is amazing, for one. One of my prized horror possessions that I forgot to get out. I was gonna get it out for this video. I'll insert a clip photo that I got at Sean Whalen's booth at Texas Frightmare weekend, which is a cast photo that I think, if I remember correctly, he told me that Helen Hunt had taken of the cast and then like printed copies for, you know, all of the cast of that movie. I love that. I really need to get it like framed really nicely, and it's gonna go up in my set somewhere at some point. But it's the perfect combination movie. So like on one hand, twisters are fucking terrifying. I've never seen one or been in the vicinity of one. My experience of tornadoes is this movie. So fucking terrified of them, right? But at the same time, like in the movie, we're following storm chasers who like love this sort of thing. So we get that awe feeling, like during Ian, for instance. For me, I still spent some time standing out on my like enclosed patio and looking out the window because it's scary and cool at the same time. And this movie does an amazing job of capturing that feeling of like just being in awe of Mother Nature. Like it's like being in awe of how scary it can be. You know, it's not the same kind of feeling of awe you get like watching like a beautiful sunset or a sunrise, or, you know, flying over like a beautiful landscape. It's not quite the same feeling. Before I end though, Safety Maven did request that I say you definitely shouldn't stand outside during a hurricane. She also mentioned that I shouldn't make it sound like it's a fun idea to fly a kite in a hurricane. I think Safety Maven just doesn't know what fun is, but that's just me. Again, please share your favorite like disaster / natural disaster movies in the comments. Don't know if I'll watch them because they might freak me out too much, but these are my go-to ones. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new here. Become a creepy peep today. And I will see you very soon with something else. Until then, stay strange. Bye.